Association. Hopefully you all are here for the correct session, which is 2026 National Change, which is what we're talking about today. And with me, I wanted to introduce our panelists that we have today. So I had Mia Nagawecki. Mia is the Vice President for Educational Strategy and Civic Engagement at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, where she works to bring great history and civic learning opportunities to Americans across the country. And then we also have with us John Dichtel. John is the President and CEO of the American Association for State and Local History, an organization dedicated to helping public history organizations and practitioners to thrive and to make the past meaningful for everyone. And last but not least, we have Caroline Klivanoff. And Caroline is a New America US at 250 Fellow and Executive Director of Made by Us, a nationwide network of hundreds of museums and historic sites working together to ignite and inform Gen Z civic participation for the 250th anniversary of the United States. So let's welcome our panelists. So I'm really excited to talk to all of you because each of you, well, particularly your organizations, have brought the spirit of collaboration to planning for 2026. So let's just, if we could just start off by, if you could share with the group, can you tell us a bit about how you're working with other groups towards the 250th and what is your approach to collaboration?
But now it's on.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dana. Yes, we started Made by Us in 2018, 2019, because several museum directors saw very, visionarily that they would not be able to meet the needs of younger generations alone. But by working together, we can build capacity to be more nimble, be more responsive, develop strategies and approaches that would work for younger generations. And as we look at the 250th, in particular for Gen Z, who will be 18 to 30 years old at this upcoming anniversary, and younger, but we're focused on adults. The one thing I can share more about our specific work and how we've collaborated and we've built this national network of museums across the country working together. But one thing I will say about collaboration that has been core to our work is we never start with a blank piece of paper. Okay, we cannot go into the 250th with, okay, 250, double underline. What do we do? So we're always looking around at the landscape, who's doing what, who's doing it well already. Let's build on our strengths and let's iterate and evolve going forward.
I think our approach maybe is a little bit different than that we did start with a blank sheet of paper. We started in 2016 with a task force, which then quickly grew, which was very much an internal task force to ASLH, but quickly grew into a coordinating committee of national organizations, federal agencies, larger institutions. But I think at almost no stage did we have, other than our field guide, which I'll probably talk about in a little bit, and the themes in the field guide, we didn't really have a set idea of what we thought the 250th was going to be. So we've seen our role as being much more of a convener, a connector, really listening to people that have come, we do these convenings and connections at several different levels or several different places. And really listening to the needs of the people in the rooms like this last year, at this event and other events at our conference, and hearing what comes out of that. And we've created tools and things out of those gatherings. So really trying to be a connector and fill in the spaces that others aren't filling in. And it's only 2 years away, and it's amazing how much work is still left for all of us. But I hope we get a chance also as a panel and as a group to talk about some of the opportunities after 2026.
Thank you. So I'm honored and thrilled to be sitting here with Caroline and John and Dana, who have been working in this collaborative space a little bit longer than I have. I joined CW about 1.5 years ago. And I'm here to represent a group of organizations who have come together in the last 7 or so months to work collaboratively towards 2026 and thinking specifically and explicitly about how we can help ensure that 2026 is a moment of collective history and civic learning for our nation. And thinking about big, ambitious ideas and projects that no one institution could achieve alone, but rather we can only achieve through collaboration. And the lessons that Caroline and John have laid out and will talk about, and the precedents that they set in that collaborative approach is really informing the work that we're doing. So this coalition is tentatively and temporarily called History 250. We'll change the name because somebody else owns the trademark. Bummer. So watch this space for the new name of our organization, our coalition. But Colonial Williamsburg is proud and privileged to be leading this effort alongside iCivics, George Washington's Mount Vernon, and the National Constitution Center to think again about how we can harness the power and the network of U.S. history museums and civic education organizations, and think about what those founding ideals were that were put on parchment 250 years ago, how they have evolved since that time, and what are their ongoing legacies, and what are our roles as Americans across generations to continue to be engaged in our civic duty. So we've organized this work into 2 buckets. One is K-12 education, for which we are focused on building history.org, which will be a collaborative site on which we'll bring together the best resources from museums and civic education organizations on one centralized resource hub that will make these assets easy to use and easy to deploy for teachers, and it will cover all of U.S. history. Our goal is to launch a beta later this year with the American Revolution content and have the full site built and populated by July 4th, 1776. And we are eager to partner with institutions across the country to contribute resources so that this can be comprehensive and inclusive. The second bucket of work is national programming and events in 2026. So we are workshopping around 2 ideas, which I'm happy to talk more about in a little bit. But the whole hope is that our powers combined, as I like to say, will mean that we can bring more people into the conversation and engage a broader swath of Americans with our collective past. And Dana, you organized Come Across to All. Do you want to tell us about that?
Not alone. But sure. So I was actually interested in listening to each of your approaches because what it did reveal is there's no one set way to collaborate. However, there is strength in collaboration nonetheless. So a blend of what John and Caroline said, we actually started off with a blank slate. And so let me back up a little bit and give you some context. So one of my jobs here is to coordinate a group of regional museum partners, and we call ourselves, we lost. Got it, okay. Are we good? Right. Great, okay. Where was I? Okay, so talking about the regional museum partnerships. So we do have a group of regional museum partners in this area that we get together on a quarterly basis. It used to be more often at the beginning, and we call ourselves Tidewater Collaborative. That group started off very small as a really small think tank, so to speak. We knew we needed to get started on doing something because 2026 was around the corner, and we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do, but we knew that it was important that we educate, we get this message out to the world, that we have a way to share our story in a way that is inclusive so that everyone can see their story as part of the American story. And so we started with a blank slate. That did not go well. And then we started to, we kind of backed up a little bit, and actually, I'm sure John will talk about this, but we looked at your field guide And then we also looked at the themes. The A250 Commission actually has some themes, and we decided to use those themes to start to shape our work, and we kind of categorize it into buckets of where our strengths were as a group and a collective. And so that was film and publications, that was exhibits and conferences, signature events, and I'm missing the other fourth bucket, teaching and curriculum. And so that helped guide the way that we approach our efforts and everything that we do. So we do think about, you know, the significant anniversaries and how we can make that relevant in those areas. So it kind of gave us our start going forward. So thank you for that. Speaking of all of the efforts, could you all share some more detail about the specific 250 related things that you do, initiatives with your organizations, and what are you working on now, and what are the goals of your work?
Yeah, so I hope many of you are familiar with the field guide. That was a decision very early, maybe 3-4 years ago, that if someone didn't set a theme, put out some ideas there, I was a little worried about who would put out the theme. We never thought that ours would be this central, but it's nice to see, and we're really gratified that people are finding it useful. So the field guide, kind of the idea behind it and the 5 themes was that if all of our sites, all of our institutions, state to state, were actually, the initial idea was that if just to give people something to build on, I guess to your point of not having a blank slate, but here, react to this. If you don't like these, come up with other themes. That was the original idea. Then as they kind of took hold, I think the idea for me became, let's help ensure that we're all speaking with one voice. Not that we have to be clones and repeat each other, but that we're using language by repetition from place to place, that for the general public, that becomes much more powerful if we're using some of the same common language. And so I think it's been a really useful tool in that way. So for ASLH, it was kind of the beginning. We're still working on it, still using it. It's kind of the middle. And there are still states and organizations that are getting into this 250 work a little bit, you know, kind of a little bit late in the process with 2.5 years to go. And for them, it's a starting point. So it's still, I think it'll be with us to the end. The other work that we've been doing is a lot of that connection work I was just speaking about we have a state network of state 250 commissions. Many of you are part of that. That meets quarterly. That started 2 years ago. That's in addition to the National Coordinating Committee that also meets quarterly. That many of you are on that as well. And then there is a group called SHAM, the State Historical Administrators Meeting, that some of you are part of. That is generally it's the leader or two in each state who's responsible for history in their state, State Historical Society, State Museum. And that is a group that ASLH has been helping to facilitate for the last 50 years. And that group has also been having regular conversations about the 250th. So we've been keeping those conversations going and facilitating them where we can. And then that listening part that I was mentioning, in all of those conversations, someone will say, wouldn't it be great if someone did this? Wouldn't it be great if we had more information about how the states are funding? Can we start a spreadsheet and then share that information? And so that has really become ASLH's role to try and do that as best we can. And then just a couple of projects that we're working on now that are new. One comes out of the field guide. It's going to be a programming handbook, really very specific ideas, generally aimed at smaller institutions of high impact programming they can do related to the 250th and the themes in our guide that are hopefully low cost. Just be very explicit. Here are some examples. Here are some ideas to get you going, and that will be coming out in a few weeks. And then the last project that I'll mention that we're working on that came out of conversations with these two and some of you in the room was, wouldn't it be great if we had one place where we could all look to see what are the national and maybe large regional projects and initiatives that are happening so that we don't all pile on top of the same dates and months for planning things, so that we know where we can turn to for resources, and so we can attract attention of others who might be involved in those national projects. And that will be part of our website. We'll need all of your help to populate that. It's not meant to be a directory of everything that's happening in every state, but more the national and large regional ways that people can, connect to each other. So things like a common cause to all, or the signature projects from America 250, projects made by us, and history.org, things like that. And that will be out in the next few weeks as well.
Thank you. Well, because John and ASLH have led the charge to do all this convening and coordinating and creating things like the field guide that focused on the themes, that has been invaluable because it freed up our organization, made by us, to focus on the tactics and on-the-ground approaches, especially to engaging younger generations. So for us, in the summer of 2020, that was quite a summer, as we all remember. A lot of headlines in the news, a lot of younger generations taking to the streets, expressing their views. Coming out of that summer and towards July 4th, there was deep sentiment among Gen Z, not all of them, that July 4th felt hollow. It was not landing. But when we really dug into this with focus groups, we came to understand that they were not saying cancel July 4th, we hate America, okay? They were saying, why doesn't our national holiday do anything for our country, right? It's patriotic, it's pride, but why is that not a day of service? Why is that not a day of civic learning? So we worked with young people to develop a civic season from Juneteenth through July 4th. Started in 2021, this will be our 4th summer this year, and so many of you in this room have brought that to life and have used the national campaign of civic season to practice approaches. What works? What do young people respond to? What hurdles do we need to overcome to work together? What are we stepping in today in terms of the headlines in the news? So that has been a very successful program. There's 500 participating organizations in 50 states. We reached 13 million Americans last year together. And I'm just incredibly proud that what we've done has always been in the mind of let's test, let's iterate, let's evolve ahead of the 250th. So we have some years of experience there under our belt. And if you want to participate this summer, please do. It's a great way to test whatever you have in mind for the actual 250th. We have a lot of gamification, slice of history pizza parties, templates for events from other organizations where it's worked well, a civic superpowers quiz, all these kinds of shared materials, but you make it your own. After 4 years of doing civic season, which again, this continues, we continually heard one piece of feedback from all organizations that we work with. When we asked, what do you need most to support your 250th work? The #1 response was feedback from actual young people. And if you'll even note in this room, they're not really present here. They're not present in our committees, in our meetings, they don't have a say. The #1 thing that Gen Z needs in order to participate civically in our country, time and time again, all of the surveys show, is a sense of belonging, that this is their country, that they have a say in affecting its future. So, all that to say, what we are building for the 250th that I think will solve both of these problems is something that we're calling Youth 250. I know, yet another 250 name, but we had to call it something. And yeah, we got the website, got the trademark. But this will consist of intergenerational workshops, a toolkit for institutions, and then what I'm most excited about, a nationwide youth advisors bureau from coast to coast. We're getting part-time young people that are not just, the future congressmen of America, but also door dashers, artists, students, engineers, entrepreneurs, people who want to have a say in how this is commemorated, and your institutions will have access to this bureau. If you need 20 minutes consult, or you need to embed someone on your site for feedback, we're gonna make it happen. That's a really important role for young people, and I think for you all. So we're very excited about that.
Sounds really exciting. And Mia, how has Made by Us and the work that they do translate into the work that you do with history.org?
Well, Caroline is one of the most impressive humans on this planet. And everything that she's accomplished through Made by Us, and all of it is collaborative with history museums, is incredibly impressive and is absolutely informing what we're getting going with History 250 and history.org. And I'll say one of our organizing ideas, which I think is sort of a theme here, is we really don't want to reinvent any wheels, right? So if Caroline has already put together a wonderful toolkit and had time to iterate on how do we engage Gen Z in meaningful ways, we don't need to do that. We can rather partner and use it. And John has already come up with these themes, which takes a huge amount of work to come up with themes about the United States and our history that will unify folks. So let's lift that and let it inform our work. And the genesis for the History 250 group, frankly, was a conversation among us and others in the field who said, the 250 landscape is kind of a giant Venn diagram, and the overlapping middle is a pinprick. So we all found ourselves in different conversations with different groups of the same people, kind of over and over again. And in some ways, that's great. That is a healthy civil society. There are a lot of groups who are working towards similar goals, but through slightly different means. That's wonderful. But how can we bring together the lessons across these groups and create a centralized place where people can find out everything that's going on and share the resources? And then for History 250, thinking specifically about museums, historic sites, cultural heritage organizations, and civic education groups, and how we can really lean into that area to hopefully help 2026 not only engage Americans in our collective past and our civic communities, but also to strengthen our institutions and to remind Americans that museums are worthy places to visit and vital parts of our communities. So one of the ideas that we were workshopping yesterday in our meeting was to put together a National Museum Passport program by which we will work collaboratively as a leadership team to establish a mechanism for people to receive a passport, physical or digital, and then go visit museums and historic sites in your community and or across the country and get a stamp or get a sticker or get a star or something, and just encourage Americans to get off the couch and go out and engage with our historic sites. So again, it's another way that we will be wanting to reach out to all of you, because we do want this to be national and inclusive. So thinking about everybody from Colonial Williamsburg and Mount Vernon, sort of the greatest hits, obvious ones that people might think of when they think of the founding history, to the small historical society in every town across America, and that these are valuable assets and are critical to the health of our civil society. We think and talk a lot about, and we heard this morning from Jane Kamensky, 1976 and the bicentennial and the investment that moment represented, and how can we help promote that too through the organizing work that we're trying to work towards collaboratively with History 250. So it's about amplifying and collective impact rather than reinventing wheels, and staying focused on sort of the spirit of 2026.
Thank you. So it's hard to believe, but we only have 2 years left before 2026 is here. And you've all talked a lot about collaborating, but what further collaboration do you think the field needs? And what can folks in this room do to support?
Just turn on the microphone for you. Yeah, so it is scary. There's only just over 2 years left, and really, if you're trying to plan something for 2026, you're really planning something for 2025. So really, there's 1 year left. But already, I think at this event and in the last several weeks, in side conversations at this event and previously, I've been thinking about for several weeks that already thinking about what comes next after 2026. And yes, for a lot of your sites, a lot of your organizations, there's the anniversary of the Constitution and everything that happens after 1776 leading up there. But also as a field, this is really dawning for me, and I hope for many of you, as an opportunity to collaborate much more than we have ever done. And maybe we did it a little bit as a field after 1976, probably not. But we have a real opportunity here to behave more as an industry together in all the best ways, not the worst ways of that, and thinking about public advocacy, asking for state funds, asking for federal funds. We're all united by history, but we often behave, in other years that do not have to do with thinking about 2026, we go back to thinking about our individual sites, maybe our individual states. And if we could stay somehow more organized going forward after 2026 and thinking about how we, the kind of study that we heard about today, how the public thinks about history, the words they react to, having those being ongoing and serving us all, rather than being individually done and kind of Harvard and serving our institutions, but if we as an industry or a field are learning together. And we tend to be divided by, well, some are museums and some are libraries and some are archives, some are local, some have national history, but if we could be more united behind the idea that we're all dealing with history all of the time, I think we could really build some great things coming out of 2026, and that gives I don't have to worry about what happens in 2026. I think most of you probably do, because I don't have visitors in 2026. So I'm maybe a little freer to start thinking about how we can stay collaborated and organized after. Let's stay organized for the next 20 years at least. I don't know if we can make it another 50, but yeah, we could. Yeah, let's dream big. We'll pin it all on history.org.
Well, I'll just chime in to say a few things. Let's put it on history.org. I mean, one of the visions and hopes for history.org is that it is a legacy project. It will launch on July 4th, 2026. And then our hope and vision is through this very collaborative and collective approach, it will continue to grow and iterate and change and persist for another 100 years, another 250 years. I don't know what the internet will look like in 100 years, but the idea of the field working together toward a collective goal, which is improving history and civic learning outcomes in our country, because we know that when we do that with primary sources, with object-based inquiry, with digital interactives, that moves the needle for students. But if we all stay on our individual hamster wheels, we're not going to see the change that we so desperately need. So thinking ambitiously about legacy projects, I think is really critical. And to that point too is, in order to really achieve that and to achieve the impact that we want, we need a very inclusive approach. And we can look around this room, as Caroline said, there's not a lot of age diversity, there's not a lot of racial diversity in this room. So as we're building our coalitions and as we're building the content for the American people, we need to make sure we understand what different kinds of Americans want and think and feel about being engaged with our collective past, and not thinking we know, but rather let's ask and let's bring more people into the conversation. So that's why Colonial Williamsburg has commissioned these studies. You heard about 2 of them this morning. We also just got some data from a national digital audience survey, which surveyed 3,000 Americans ages 13 and up who tracked with the demographics of the 2020 census to ask about how do you want to engage with US history in the digital space? Where do you spend your time digitally? How do you want to engage with digital history? Where do you think you might be in a couple of years? So let's take that data, which is the people telling us what they want, and let that drive what we're doing rather than our thinking we know, because we are a small fraction. And I think we're really good at talking to each other and talking to ourselves, but we need to be more inclusive as we collaborate.
I could not agree more, Mia, and I'll just add this for color. I'm the daughter of a newspaper editor, lifelong newspaper journalist. I know institutions are not guaranteed tomorrow, right? We've seen it. We've seen it happen time and time again. My dream would be for the 250th of the United States to be a springboard to a better future for the public, of course, but also to be a moment for institutions to really develop the strength and nimbleness and capacity that we need to make sure that we do have a future. This is the time to future-proof our institutions, and trust is eroded, our capacity is eroded post-COVID. There's all kinds of problems and chinks in the armor. But this is the moment that we need to rally together and make sure that we're thinking 50 and 100 years ahead from this moment. And working together does prevent us from being, vulnerable to becoming a single point of failure, but we can be a fortified front.
Thank you. So, and I'm going to have one more question, then I'll turn it over to the audience for questions. How can the folks here get involved in the work that you're doing?
Sure, well, we're easy to find, Made by Us, historymadebyus.org, but there's room for everyone in this. We actually operate by learning from what our partner museums do on the ground. So if someone starts a youth advisory board, they report back how that went, what were the challenges. Someone tries, trivia night, they report that back, and we get that data and we learn together. So there's lots of ways to get involved with Made by Us. And I would just encourage everyone to reach out, just work with one other museum or one other company or organization or media group you haven't worked with before. So.
Well, please join our organization, join ASLH, come to our conference, use any of our materials that have to do with the 250th, of course. But I had one thought about the last question, so I'm just gonna throw that in here. And some of you have heard this before, but there was a study that ASLH did in 1982 or 83, so a few years after the bicentennial, and it was called A Culture at Risk, and it included counting the number of history organizations in the country and their founding date. And I went back and looked at that and learned that 30 to 40% of all the history organizations that existed in the early 1980s had come about during the bicentennial era, which is several years before and a few years after the bicentennial. So a huge, huge explosion in state and local history. No one wants to see that happen again. It's hard enough. Those of you who work at small institutions know how hard it is to find funding and visitors and stay afloat sometimes as a small nonprofit. But I think that that's not going to happen again. I'll boldly predict that won't happen again, and that what we can do differently this time are the things that my two co-panelists here have been talking about, in particular, making this a more inclusive field, and then just also being more organized as, I guess, kind of an industry, as I was talking about. That kind of energy could happen with this 250th. So as far as participating in our stuff, just find us on the web, come to our conference, keep coming to this, stay connected with these two.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we're going to have that either, John. We have museums of ice cream instead now, so, But I agree now and echo what you're saying, which is I think the future strength of our field is in collaboration, is in these collective projects. And projects that have products that people outside of our field can use and engage with and participate in. So let's keep that front of mind. Again, the real user-focused approach to public history basically. So how you can get involved with History 250 or history.org, send me an email. We're kind of just emerging from the ideation phase for History 250 generally, and the research and development phase for history.org. You saw just a teeny tiny snippet of the research results from our national teacher survey. This morning we did a lot of other sort of qualitative work as well to inform our approach. So we're in the very, very beginnings of actually building the site, and therefore are now at the moment where we are ready to expand the group that we are inviting to participate and to contribute resources so that we can reach as many teachers with the best possible stuff as we can. So I am the only Mia Nagawicki in the world, and very easy to find. So please just send me an email, or I'm happy to share my card with you. But it's meant to be a very inclusive approach. So please do reach out, because strength in numbers is absolutely the name of the game here.
Thank you all. So we have about 10 minutes. So I wanted to turn it over to the audience if anyone has any questions. I'll have to run the mic as well. So there's another one right here. Great, thanks. I have the answer. It's after lunchtime. That is why. Big question?
I have a question, since no one else is running for my
Okay, go ahead.
Some of the research that Matt was showing us, will that be available that people could download from somewhere? I saw a lot of people taking pictures of screens.
Yeah, we are figuring out the best way to share both. Well, we've done 3 studies in the last few years. So the digital audience study, which you didn't hear about this morning, and the teacher study are both really kind of hot off the presses. So we're still in the process of analyzing and understanding them for ourselves, and then we'll figure out the best way by which to make that data available to the field. We don't want to hold on to it, we do want to share it, but we are kind of still just getting our own heads around it. So some of it is sneak preview. The brand strategy study is really very focused on Colonial Williamsburg's brand, the vast majority of it. So the pieces that are applicable to the broader field you kind of heard about this morning. If you have follow-up questions about that, please just reach out. But we don't at the moment have a plan to share that more broadly, just because it is sort of CW brand specific.
We have one question.
John's got a great point. And you've got a great website.
And area, it's how much should be.
Is that it?
Yeah, no.
No.
Well,
Hello?
yes.
Is that better? Sorry. John's got a great point. And got a great. John's got a great point. We've got a great website. Have you thought about, like, this afternoon putting the PDF of the slides there for a download so that people could
Was it just
start to have access to it? The idea of having like a distillation or write-up and so forth is a great idea, and that can come later.
Dana will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all of the slide decks that you'll see over the course of Common Cause will then be posted on the Common Cause website after the event. I believe we did that last year, right, Dana? Yeah. Yeah, we did it last year. John says we did.
Okay, I believe you.
So Cheryl Wilson will send a follow-up email after the conference concludes, and will indicate when those anything that you saw on the screens, that is shareable. I don't know that Rosie Rios will be able to share her slides for obvious reasons, but anything that's shareable will be posted on the Common Cause website.
Okay, one question back here.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm one of the fortunate few people to actually live here in Williamsburg. I get to enjoy the farmer's market every Saturday and get some good organic food every day. So I'm here because I'm in the performing arts. And I'm listening to all of this talk, and it's great about all the museums and the history and everything else. But I just want us not to forget that how much music has played a part in our history. And I think for the past 25 years before COVID, I got the opportunity to perform in 48 states and did 44 national tours of Australia, New Zealand, and Canada and Europe, performing American music. And this is very important for all of us. It's a tie-in for all generations. And I'm in the process of putting together a production called Strike Up the Band, which is going to be using hopefully local symphonies and bringing in, tying in with some celebrities. Sorry, Taylor Swift is not available. And putting together a program reflecting each state, music and contributions, everything from Gershwin to Jerome Kern to Irving Berlin, contemporary, go back to William Billings in New England. There's a whole history that will grab the public and get them to come and understand what American history is, and maybe go to the museums and extend that vision. And so I just encourage you all to think about that concept of employing and working. I'm working on getting a national sponsor, so maybe it won't even cost anything, maybe, we'll see. But I wish you the best of luck, and I think that we can all work together to celebrate American music and American history. And one last comment, when I was in Washington, D.C. for 30 years, I was a pianist for the singing sergeants with the Air Force Band. And we got to travel again, so my life on a bus is nothing unusual to me. But please, please concentrate not only on the visual arts, but on the performing and the music and the history of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had a question. Hello, everybody.
My name is Stephen Ladd, and my brother and I are the artists that are doing a major exhibition at the Kennedy Center in 2026 to represent America, and we're collaborating with museums all over the country. And I guess my question is, are you just partnering with history museums, or are you also doing partnerships with art museums? Because our project is collaborating with art museums and history museums, but we're also working with education departments at the NFL, MLB, and different other kind of organizations, but it would be great to have a database of connections like that.
I can say that, for Made by Us, the Made by Us network is museums, historic sites, and civics organizations with credible resources to offer. However, Civic Season is open to any kind of group to participate in, and we've seen amazing uptake from all kinds of organizations. Libraries, universities, corporations have started sending their employees to museums during Civic Season. So there's definitely, and we've done a number of arts activations as well in the past couple of years. So there's definitely room for all. And I would encourage folks to think about, working with music, working with arts. I live in fear that Taylor Swift will do another tour in 2026. And between that and the World Cup, we're just done for. Or we can get ahead of it and work with those kind of groups.
And now I'm playing a game of where's World, and I'm here back. We have another question.
I think this is a question for John, but anyone can chime in. My husband's a sitting federal appellate judge. Doug Ginsburg is his name. And public television, knowing that he had been a Harvard Law professor, commissioned him a few years ago, or asked him to work with some 501c3s, which we did, and put together a series of things for public television, a 3-part series called A More or Less Perfect Union. And he followed that up with a couple of other productions, which I'd be happy to talk to anyone about. But my question is this, John, particularly. So we had a terrific response from America. Public television, 89%, 92% of different audiences watched this program. When we went, then we decided we needed to do curriculum. So we went into the schools. You have to go state by state because it's like insurance to get. And what happened was this. We got an overwhelming response from teachers who said, we don't feel qualified to teach civics. And I said, what? I taught civics. I was a social studies teacher. We were trained. They said, we are no longer trained. We don't know how to teach civics. So I think this is something, and I want to know if you have anything pending like this, to teach teachers through your association with history. I think, if you really want to know why you don't have Generation X interested, it's because they don't get it in school. So I just would love to have help on this in any way or enlightenment. Thank you. I appreciate your comment.
Well, I'm going to completely duck that question. So our association, a lot of members of our association, museums, historical societies, historic sites, have a lot of connection to K through 12 educators and students in their communities. We as an association tend not to do much with that because there are other associations that do. And again, that's one of the ways that the history field is really divided up, probably too many associations and too many kind of leaders, I guess. But there's the National Council on Social Studies, which is here. Larry Pasca here. It might even be in the room. Larry, are you in the room? And there's the National... Oh, he's on the other panel right now. And National Council on History Education is another one. American Historical Association. Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate that question. I, before working here, worked for the Center for Civic Education, which is very focused on teacher training and preparing teachers to teach civics. As I mentioned, iCivics is one of our core partners on History 250 and History.org. And so one of the real organizing ideas of the approach here, and why I keep talking about our founding ideals, is how to recognizing that most American teachers, especially in elementary school, have very little instructional time for social studies generally, let alone civics specifically. Providing teachers with resources in the form of instructional resources as well as professional development programming on-site or online, and just-in-time professional development on history.org that demonstrates how to effectively teach history and civics concurrently is going to be a key piece of this. We as a field cannot change the systemic issues of social studies education in our country. We can try, and many of us do, iCivics and the Civics Now Coalition principle among them. But what we can do is meet teachers where they are, listen to their articulated needs as you just expressed, and we hear the same thing, and provide them with resources and training that are very easy to understand and easy to deploy, so that in that limited instructional time that they do have for social studies, they are able to move the needle a little bit on not just helping students memorize name and dates like we heard about in AP US History, although I would argue AP is its own special animal over here. Not just memorize names and dates, but think critically about the American past and the legacies with which we live every day to do with our structure of government and our civic responsibilities. So that is a big piece of what we're working towards as we build out history.org. With that, I think we're out of time.
Okay, are you sure? Okay, we have one quick question and then.
My name is Sandy Kelby. I'm CEO and president at the Fredericksburg Area Museum. Something I know that many of us in the room think about all the time, as you just mentioned, is the industry and making industry stronger. And something I wrestle with, and we hear that a lot. This is an opportunity to make our industry stronger and collaborate together. Are there any thoughts about what are some real tactile things that we can actually do to come together to do more advocacy and bring it together? What are some of those things in the room that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I've got one. So there will be we have 3 panels next, right? Is that? Right. Oh, 2. One of them is about funding. One of the set of speakers on that panel will be talking about approaching Congress to get federal funding for the 250th through 6 or 7 different agencies. And it's an effort that several state leaders and I and the 2 speakers have been working on for several months. We're going to need everyone's help eventually to put some pressure on members of Congress. It's a very difficult time, of course. I've been hearing that for 15 years. This is a difficult time to ask for money. If we don't ask now, when are we going to ask? And you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, that kind of thing. So I think that would be a very concrete way for everyone to be involved, is be asking members of Congress to join the America 250 caucus, which is an easy ask. As we heard from Rosie, it's the fastest growing, soon to be the largest. We're going to beat adoption. That should be our goal, beat adoption. And then have some specific funding asks year after year after year, not just this year for 2026, but we need to keep doing this.
Want to be mindful of time, so let's just give the thanks to our panel.